I'm writing a book. It's almost done. It's called Soulforce: How to Discover Your Artistic Purpose, Create More Freely, and Make Art That Matters. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about this. The big question is, what's ours to do? And specifically for artists, what's ours to do in these times, these turbulent times? You know, in our society, the arts are often viewed, it's like important, but kind of frivolous as well. The arts are thought of more as like luxuries, hobbies, and that never felt right to me. And I think it doesn't feel right to a lot of artists and a lot of art lovers. And I also think a lot about the state of the world. I think very deeply about this. I consider myself a bit of a philosopher, and so I was wondering over the past couple of years, is there some role for musicians and artists, to make a positive contribution to a world in need? And the answer is yes. At least this is what my book tries to answer. And it all has to do with what you believe the sort of core issue in the world is. For me, all of the sort of chronic, terrible issues that we face, whether it's ecological destruction or political strife or inequality or whatever it is, they all have a similar flavor, a kind of disconnection, fragmentation, separation. In my mind, they all come from a similar perspective in which we regard ourselves and our world, each other, as things to be manipulated. How is it that we could cut down a beautiful old growth forest? Well, if you view it as a thing to be manipulated, you call it a resource, and you can extract value from that resource. There's no sense of relationship between you and the forest. There's no moral valence to your actions. It's just a thing. And if you look at any of these big issues, the same kind of thinking is going on underneath this. Now, the answer is to regard ourselves, each other, the world, as beings to be honored. How could you cut down an entire forest if you knew it to be a being? There's an actual relationship with beings. And maybe you'd still practice forestry, but the way that you go about that would be so different. There'd be a sense of honoring the intelligence, the life within the forest. So now, a lot of people are surprised, a lot of people who aren't artists are surprised to hear that a similar kind of thing happens within the arts world, where it's become, to some extent, dominated by this perspective of a thing to be manipulated. We regard our bodies as things to be manipulated in the creative act. We regard our creativity that way. And I'll give you some examples. Just an example from my own life. So I was in music school. I was playing for many hours a day, and excited to get better and to learn. And midway through my training, I started to have pain in my arms. Right here and right here. Within a couple months, I could barely play anymore. It got really bad. I saw all the doctors, all the therapists, you name it, I tried it, and I was still in pain. I realized later that, looking back on it now, I can see that the attitude that I was bringing to my practice sessions at the time, playing in an orchestra or whatever it was to regard myself, my body, as kind of like a robot, subject to my bidding. Like I made myself practice for hours a day, and I looked like this when I played. I look pretty different now, right? Right? So this was a part of the same worldview that is causing our societal problems. It was right there in my own body. And then when I found the Alexander technique, it really opened my eyes to, first, the fact that I was doing this. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was so used to it. This is just the way I played violin. What? But of course it was really hurting my body. And so what the Alexander technique did, briefly, it's a method of learning how to use your body with less tension, more freedom, more fluidity. And what it allowed me is to begin seeing my body as a being with its own needs and feelings and intelligence. And that made all the difference. Instead of trying to impose my will onto my body, impose my will onto my music, then there started to be this whole other quality in my playing. Because you see, like forcing, this is part of the whole ideology of viewing things as things to be manipulated. What can you do to make a change other than force and control? But that makes for a really crappy art. And it also it hurts, at a societal level, it hurts each other. So my book then takes all this to account. It's a holistic arts pedagogy based on this worldview of seeing ourselves, our creativity, our world as beings to be honored. And what that gives rise to is the title of the book, Soulforce. And Soulforce, briefly, is the transformative, creative energy that comes from facing life's challenges from a place of wholeness, aliveness, and connection, as opposed to fragmentation, force, and control. And this is the juice. This is what we all really want. Soulforce is the difference between playing a bunch of notes and real music, for instance. So I'm going to play a few more pieces, and then I'm going to give you a very brief guided experience of your own soul force. So you can look forward to that. Thank you. All right, so I mentioned before that I'd like to give you an experience of what I was talking about earlier. I heard this really great quote even today. It's easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking than it is to think yourself into a new way of acting. So to have an experience of something, ideas are nice, but to have an experience of something is really where it's at. And so we're going to do something very briefly together. So earlier I was talking about the difference between viewing yourself, the world, anything as a thing to be manipulated versus a being to be honored. And this has a real impact on your body. So who here gets tense sometimes? Your shoulders, your back, your neck, who knows what it is, right? Where does that come from? It's this thing that I'm talking about. It's regarding yourself as a thing to be manipulated, or the things that you're working with in that way. So we're going to do a very simple little exercise here to give you an experience of what I'm talking about. So I want you to bring your hands together. I want you to tap your thumbs together, and then your first fingers together, and then your fingers one after the other, going back and forth. All right, and then I want you to look at your hands and regard your hands as things to be manipulated. All right, and just notice what that does. Some people are noticing things. Okay, so just notice your body, notice the kind of attention that you're paying. These are things to be manipulated. All right, so let's pause that. What does anybody notice? You getting tighter or freer?
Tighter.
Tighter, freer. Having more fun or less fun?
It's a barrel of laughs.
A barrel of laughs. Got it.
And listening to music, that was the question.
All right, so does it feel familiar to anybody?
Not really.
No? Okay. Well, you all are a lot better off than a lot of people. Okay, so the antidote to that is to regard yourself, your hands here, as beings to be honored. So let's try that. Same finger pattern. Just look at your hands and think of them as beings to be honored. And just notice what that does. What does that do to your body? What does that do to your field of attention? What does anybody notice?
More flow.
More flow?
It actually moved me to tears to make the shift.
Ah,
Yeah, that's powerful.
moved you to tears. Yeah, so there's maybe a longing inside for that kind of attitude. Yeah, I feel that. Anybody else?
The word loving came to mind.
The word loving, yeah, definitely.
A lighter touch, more of a caress than just a banging together.
Yeah, more of a caress than banging together. So I'll ask the same questions I asked before. Did you get tighter or freer in your body? Did you have more fun or less fun?
More.
More fun. So look at this. This beatific state is just a thought away. Now, this is a real challenge for a lot of us because there's so many forces in our society that compel us to view ourselves and whatever it is that we do as things to be manipulated. You know, if you want to make the buck, or if you want to get political power, or whatever it is, this is how you do it. But what Soulforce is bringing this more loving, flowing way of being to the very same challenges that you have in your life already. Soulforce comes from Mahatma Gandhi's movement of nonviolence. He knew that fighting against the British Raj would just end in failure because the British Raj had greater military power. So what did he do? He faced that challenge from a place of wholeness and connection. This soul force. And it can be very inspiring. And when it happens, when we bring that same quality to our creative challenges, and I believe everybody has these. You don't have to call yourself an artist to have creative challenges. When you bring those same qualities to your creative challenges, then you get access to that same inspiring creative energy. And you'll probably have a lot more fun, too. All right, I'm going to play a couple more pieces for you.